So welcome. Thank all of you for joining us on this webinar for busy lawyers. We're delighted that you could take some time out of your day. Especially, this is a wonderful topic, and we're very glad that you can invest the time into doing this. To give you a brief scenario, Webinars for Busy Lawyers is put on by Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers in our program, LOMAP, Massachusetts Law Office Management Assistance Program. We provide free and confidential services for all Massachusetts legal professionals. Some of these services include our monthly webinars for busy lawyers from experts in the field, giving you practical tips you can take away in talks that are around 30 minutes or less. We also offer, as one of our services, free consultations, including on legal tech. So if you have questions on things that you have seen today, please follow up and we can do individual consultations that are free and confidential as well. As a note, for a commonly asked question, yes, the recording will be available on demand, and it will also be emailed to all registrants. It will be available on our website, Mass LOMAP, on the Webinar for Busy Lawyers archive. And I also want to note to please enter questions in the chat, and we'll address questions at the end. And to give you a quick scenario before I turn it over to Matt, our topic today is the legal client journey, the path to delightment, which I personally love. I love puns. And also this is very important topic that a lot of lawyers don't think about. To give you a little background on our expert today, Matt Spiegel is a lawyer and serial entrepreneur in the legal tech space. He is co-founder and CEO of Lawmatics, the #1 attorney-client relationship management platform that provides law firms with client intake, CRM, and marketing automation. With Lawmatics, law firms win more business, impress clients, and are more efficient. Prior to Lawmatics, Matt was founder and CEO of MyCase, a legal practice management software company that was acquired by Appfolio in 2012. And I'll just add a note there. Most solo attorneys that I talk to in small firms say MyCase continues to be one of their favorite products for user interface. So Matt, we're delighted to have you here, and please take it away.
Awesome, yeah. Thank you very much for that warm intro, Laura. I will breeze by through my bio slide because you did such a good job of introducing me, so I don't need to go through that again, which actually makes me very happy because I'd rather talk about the important stuff. So what we're going to talk about today, this idea of the client journey and what we call the path to delightment is not so. It's like a reframe of how to think about your law firm, really, right? And I think it's a reframe of, it's kind of like erasing what you've been taught, or just forgetting what you've been taught about like being a lawyer, just putting that aside and just focusing on the business side of it, right? And forgetting about the practice of law when it comes to your clients and thinking more about customer service and delighting them at every step of the process. And it's a topic that I think all lawyers tend to think that they're good at, right? They tend to think like, oh, yeah, I'm pretty good at customer service and I treat my clients really well. But the reality of it is you may, but not good enough in all likelihood, right? And we're going to talk a lot about like what that journey looks like, what the client journey looks like through a law firm. We're going to break it down into like different phases, and we're going to talk about what you can do at each phase to really delight your client and what it means to delight your client at each phase. And then we're also going to talk about a topic that I like to talk about, which is a little bit of like metrics, like what you want to measure and how you want to measure your client engagement and your delightment and really get an idea that you're succeeding at these things. And this is kind of how I always like to start it off, by this idea that like, we are lawyers, and I'm with you. I'm a lawyer. I don't practice anymore. Obviously, as you heard, I did MyCase and now I'm doing Lawmatics. But I did practice, and so I am still a lawyer, and I was right there with you guys. And I hung a shingle after working at a big law firm. I hung a shingle and did my own law firm for a while, and I know this all too well, that we're taught to be a lawyer, and we're pretty good at being lawyers, but we're not CEOs. Right? And we're not taught how to do this in law school. What I think is interesting is we started to see a shift of that. I've actually been asked to come into some law firms to help teach a class on, practice management, for example. But it's still just paid lip service. It's not something that we're really taught in law school, right? And that makes a lot of sense. We shouldn't be taught that stuff in law school. We need to learn how to be a lawyer. That's what it's there for. But we need to be thinking about it as a lot more than a law firm. And even if you're working at a firm, you may think to yourself, oh, you know what, this doesn't apply to me. I work at a big firm. I don't really need to worry about this. That's not true at all. In any interaction that you have with a client, you need to be thinking about things in this way. You need to be thinking about things in more than just terms of the letter of the law and the practice of law. And you need to be thinking about it in terms of customer service and whether you're delighting the client. But if you are running a business, and I assume that most of you watching are in some way, shape, or form actually, running your law firm, it's hard work, right? There's a lot of things that you need to do. You need to get new clients. You need to make sure you need to maintain an office. You need to grow your firm. You need to do all of your scheduling. You need to do all of your marketing. And oh yeah, you also need to still remember to be a good lawyer, right? You still need to remember to have good outcomes for your clients, right? This is a lot of work, right? But it's not just about being a lawyer. But at the end of the day, like, this equation to me sums everything up. Happy clients equals a happy practice. If your clients are happy, you will have a successful practice. And I will tell you one thing that I have seen kind of ring true throughout all the years that I've been doing this. One of the great things about being in legal tech for all this time is that I get to talk to so many law firms, and I get to see how so many law firms function. And one thing that I've seen time and time again is that you don't have to necessarily be the best lawyer in the world to have a really successful practice, right? And it's because of this right here, right? The flip side of that is also true. You could be the absolute best lawyer in the world that gets nothing but incredible outcomes for your clients. But if your clients aren't happy, if you're not delighting them, you're not going to be successful. If you're, pardon my expression, but if you're an asshole and you're just a really, really good lawyer, your business is going to suffer from that. And that may not have been the case 15, 20 years ago, but that 100% is the case now. Happy clients equals a happy practice. And it's very important to be thinking about that when, in every step of the journey, which we're going to talk about. So what is the client journey, right? You've heard me talk about this now, mention it a couple times, but the client journey is really your customer's experience, right? It's the experience that they have with your law firm. And we're going to break it down into like 3 specific phases of that journey, but it's really the moment that they first contact you, whether that's through a website or through a phone call or a receptionist. It's that first moment that they have an interaction with your firm, all the way through until they're long gone, long done being a customer. It extends way after. It really goes in perpetuity at that point. But it's their experience that they have every step of the way. That's the client journey that we're going to talk about. And what's important to remember about it is that every stage of that journey, every moment is an opportunity for you to delight that customer, right? And the word delight is really important, because delight doesn't necessarily mean getting them a successful outcome. Because if you're doing that during the intake stage, well, there is no outcome, right? So you're not going to delight them with the outcome. Like, you're not going to delight them with being a good lawyer during the intake stage, because they're just trying to decide if they're going to hire you or not, right? So it's really about understanding that this word delight is just giving them a great experience at every different stage, every different interaction that they have with you and your firm. So what are the stages? And this is just my way of thinking about it. You can definitely break it down differently if you like, and you can, slice and dice it into more finite sections. But for me, I think that this sums up the client journey pretty well. You have phase 1, which is the intake phase, right? And this is the moment that a lead contacts your firm, all the way up until the signing of the fee agreement or the payment of that initial retainer, everything in between, right? That's the intake phase. That's phase 1. Phase 2 is now there's an active matter, right? The client has hired you to represent them. You now have a defined scope of services. You have a fee agreement that defines the case that you're representing them on. And for this phase, there is a definitive start and there is usually a definitive end as well, right? That's phase 2. Phase 3, which is one of my favorites. It's, I think, the most important stage as a business, and it's the most neglected stage at all law firms that I've ever spoken to. And that is after the case is over, right? The matter's over. This client is now a former client, and that relationship needs to be maintained, nurtured, and really you're going to get rewarded for that, right? One thing we know, and we're going to talk about this more, but like vast majority of business for law firms comes from referrals, right? Well, how are you going to get that referral? It's not going to be by just saying, thank you, I did a good job, and go on your way and never talk to them again, right? So there's a lot of things that you want to think about in this stage, which we will get into. So phase 1, the intake phase. This phase is near and dear to my heart, obviously, because you know what we do at Lawmatics is very focused on phase 1. It's also focused on phase 3. But intake is such a critical time in the client journey, right? And the reason is because, like, look, it's the first impression, right? It's the first impression that you're going to give about your law firm and about what that client can expect, right? So what's really important to do in this intake phase, and what really is a way to delight your client during that intake phase, is with immediate engagement, right? So if I'm a client and I come to your website and I fill out a form because I want to know more about, you know, I want to maybe talk to you about my case. If I get engaged immediately, well, first of all, I'm not looking for any other law firm now because I'm already talking to you. But second is that puts a smile on my face. That makes me feel really good. I am delighted. Instant communication like that is always going to create a delightful experience for your client. That's one way that you can delight them in the intake phase. But what's really important is that by showing them that rapid response, you're indicating to them how you will communicate during their actual matter. It's like an audition, right? You're auditioning for their business. And if you don't respond to them right away, well, they might be thinking like, okay, well, if they can't respond to me now as a potential new business, how are they going to respond to me when I'm actually a customer, right? Now, you might also then be thinking is like, that's unreasonable. If I communicate with them instantly in the intake phase and then they expect that of me during the active case, I can't do that. But I'm going to give you strategies, and like technology is there to help you do just that, right? But it's also, you need to remember, it is on from hello, right? So as soon as that first method of contact is initiated, whether it's filling out a form on your website or calling in and getting a receptionist or someone, from that very moment on, it's your opportunity to give excellent customer service, right? So you need to remember, it starts right away. And look, nobody can do these things that are needed during the intake process to delight. Nobody can do these things themselves, right? You just can't do it. Automation is really key to this phase, to delighting. I would say that automation is really key to delighting your customer at every different phase, but especially during the intake phase, it's really, really important because, again, things need to happen pretty quickly and pretty instantly, and you're a busy lawyer. You're not going to have the ability to do that unless you have some sort of automation system in place to help you do it. Phase 2, the active matter, right? I'm going to repeat this. The outcome is only part of the experience, right? The outcome that they get as a result of your lawyering is really only a portion, and arguably a small portion, of the total experience that they're going to get. They are more than just a matter. They hired you to represent them zealously, but this is not what it's not only what it's about. Communication is by far the easiest way to delight your client during this phase of the journey, and really during all phases of the journey. Did you know that still, this was the case when I started my case like almost 12 years ago, and it is still the case now. that the number one complaint at every state bar association is not that you're a bad lawyer. It's not that you performed malpractice. It's that you didn't communicate with me enough. It's still the number one complaint at every state bar is attorney-client communication, which is absolutely ridiculous to me because there is so many tools out there to help you make sure that you are over communicating with your clients. So forget for 1 second, just forget even delighting them. Just delivering the basic level of service now should be really easy. But again, the communication, I think, is the easiest way to delight your customer at every phase, but you just can't forget about it during the active matter, right? You're just coming off the intake phase. You're just thinking to yourself, I wooed this client. I was competing against other law firms and I provided such a great experience to them that they hired me. You can't give up, right? You can't just rest on your laurels there and then fall back to just being a lawyer. It's not going to work. You have to keep that level of communication and that level of customer service. You have to keep it up, right? And then it's about marketing, right? Like you're going to market to these people. It's okay to market to your current clients. So like if you're a law firm that's sending out a newsletter to keep clients updated on what's going on with your firm or what's going on with the industry that you're in, the practice area that you're in, your newsletter and other emails are really valuable tools at this stage, and they can help delight your customer, right? Like even though they're going through a case, if they receive an email correspondence from you that's like sharing, newslettery stuff, news about the firm, maybe landmark decisions in the practice area that just happened. These are things like the client might not read them, right? I'll be honest. They might just look at the email and then toss it into trash or whatever they want to do with it. But it's that communication point. It's still an engagement point, and it's still really, really valuable to you as a law firm, and it will still delight your customer, even if they don't really care necessarily about the content. And then there's technology, and this is really important. And I'm going to harp on this for a minute because, like at Lawmatics, we just launched a client portal, right? And the reason why we launched a client portal is because this communication is so important for not just during the intake, but also during the active case. You need to let your clients into your tech stack as much as you can. There are so many great tools for us as lawyers out there now, right? And a lot of these tools have a component that can make the client happier and can engage the client into that software as well. You should use them. They're there for a reason. Client portal is probably the biggest example. If you have a product that has a client portal and you're not using it, you're missing out on a huge opportunity, right? Let them into your tech. Use the tech to help you generate a better customer experience. You will be heavily rewarded for it. Phase 3, the former client phase, the most neglected and the biggest opportunity. This is the reason why it's the biggest opportunity. 75% of a law firm's business comes from referrals, right? Well, how are you going to get referrals? You got to keep your clients happy, right? You might have a client who has a really good outcome and they remember who you are for like a year, but then 5 years later, when someone else needs a lawyer, they're not going to remember you, but they will remember you if they're constantly hearing from you, if they're getting emails from you, like a drip campaign for a year after their case is closed, or if they're getting a newsletter from you every 6 months. Again, they might not read it, but they're seeing the name of your law firm and they're remembering the experience they had with you. And so when someone else needs you, they're going to, a friend of theirs, they're going to send them over your way. So this is the single biggest missed opportunity, right? Because far too many law firms just think that the relationship ends with the matter. Matter's over, my relationship is over, and that's really it. And then they just expect that if they ever need a lawyer in the future, or if they ever need any help, they're going to come back to them. But that's not the case, maybe for a short period of time, but not in the long term. Engagement is really, really critical at this stage. Drip campaigns and other engagement cadences are critical. And a drip campaign, for those of you that don't know, I'll give you a great example, because all of you guys should have a drip campaign like this implemented, whether it's Lawmatics or any other system to do it. When that case is over, you should have at least 6 to 7 emails that go out to that client over the course of the next 12 months. And there are things like checking in, just being like, hey, it's been a month since we talked. I just want to make sure that everything is okay. Would you have any more questions about your case? And depending on your practice area, you have specific things that you can ask or that you can bring up. And then maybe 2 months later, you send them an email that actually asks for a review on a review site, right? You're checking in on them, and you're also saying, if you had a great experience, we'd love for you to leave us a review. And then you leave a link for them to drop a review. And then maybe 4 months later, you're checking in at the 6-month mark, you're checking in again, and then at the 9-month mark, and then at the year mark. And then you're saying, hey, it's been a year since your case has been closed. Hope everything is great. Please let us know if you need anything, and you kind of close the loop a little bit, but then you're still going to communicate with newsletters and other emails, right? It's really important. And then milestones. Milestones are such an easy way to delight your customers. I can't see everybody, but I bet if I say how many, by a show of hands, how many people here are sending an email to all of their former clients on their birthday, that I'm guessing none of you are going to have your hands raised, right? But every single one of you should. And with technology now available, like in Lawmatics, for example, this is just like a couple clicks, and that's all you have to do. And then you will be sending an email to your clients on their birthday every year. And other things like the anniversary of something happening in their case is another good milestone. Newsletters are a really good thing, right? But there's just constant reasons for you to engage with your former clients that you need to do, because you need to be thinking about this last point here, which is that it is a relationship, not a client, right? All of your clients are people. And what you have to remember is that client, when they were using you as their lawyer, that was probably the most important thing that was happening in their lives at that time. So you need to treat that accordingly. It's a relationship, it's not just a client. So in the last few minutes here, I'm going to take just a couple minutes and then open up for any questions. It's really important to measure everything. This also goes into thinking about your firm and more than just being a lawyer and more as a business. If you can't really measure it, I wouldn't do it. And that's things like, these are the critical KPIs that I think are really, really important, are conversion rates. Like, what are the percentage of leads that go on to become clients? Your cost per lead and your cost per client. How much does it cost you, whether you're spending money on marketing or referral sources or anything? How much does it cost you to acquire a lead? And how much does it cost you to acquire an actual client? This is the lifeblood of any law firm. If you don't know these numbers, you better figure them out, because you might be upside down with a lot of your marketing spend if you're not aware of what these numbers are. Your revenue by source and your conversion rate by source. If you are a law firm that is doing anything beyond just getting referrals, if you're doing Google advertising, if you're doing seminars, if you're advertising in a magazine or wherever it is, you need to be able to measure how much revenue you're generating from those sources and your conversion rates by per each source, because you can't just be throwing money into a dark hole. If you're spending any money on marketing at all, you need to be able to attribute and measure how people are coming to your firm so that you can know if those dollars are working. And then I also like measuring your consultation show rate. When you're going through intake and you're trying to delight these customers and you're trying to get them to come in for your consultation, you should be measuring how many people actually come and show up, because if they don't show up, they can't hire you, right? And look, if they're not showing up, it's probably because they weren't delighted in the process getting up there, right? They had something that kind of triggered them to be like, hey, you know what? I booked the appointment to go in and see this lawyer, but I'm not going to go because something about me, I wasn't delighted at every step of the way, right? It all kind of comes down at the end of the day to providing that really good customer service. So your automation strategy, I think, is really important here, because all of these things that we're talking about, being able to delight your customer, you have to use automation to do it. So a couple kind of key points to get going with automation is, first of all, you need to know your processes. You need to understand what processes you have in place, right? And then write them out. Like, actually literally write down on paper the different processes that you have or that you would like to have. And then once you have this process written down, you can then determine what triggers that process. So like, hey, here's my process. I want to send a text message to a new client that has a link to book an appointment. And then I want them to book their appointment. And then I want to send them a reminder email or a confirmation email that they booked their appointment. And then I want to send them a reminder email a day before their appointment or an hour before their appointment, and I want to have directions to my office or a link to Zoom, whatever it is. You write out that process and then you define what triggers it. So now I've got this great process. And okay, I want it to start when somebody fills out a form on my website or when somebody calls into my firm. And so it's very simple. If you just write out these processes, then you can determine your triggers. And then each of those different actions inside of the process will be the actions that make up your automation. So it's just one little strategy I can give you to just actually write out the processes that you want to have. And then it's pretty easy to effectuate those into automations. So what is your tech stack? What kind of technology can you use for this journey, right? Well, I gave you a little bit of an idea here with this slide of like kind of where some common software fits into the stack. For the intake and the former client, that phase 1 and phase 3, Lawmatics is a really good resource. In phase 2, which is that practice management stuff, you've got MyCase, you've got Practice Panther, you've got Smokeball, you've got Clio, you've got Filevine. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of kind of like some of the tools you might already be using and what you might need to fill in some of the gaps. But with this type of a tech stack, whether it's Lawmatics with Smokeball or with Clio, right, you are going to have all of the tools that you need to 100% have 100% coverage throughout the entire journey to be able to delight your customers. You're going to need to do a little bit of work, right? It's not just going to happen for you automatically. But if you're thinking about it in terms of customer service, put yourselves in the position of like Amazon or Zappos, right? Think about what those companies do that give people such an incredible experience and start doing some of that in your law firm. And that is my condensed version, which I hope we did well on time. And I would love to take any questions or comments if we still have a few minutes.
Matt, that was perfect on time. Thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful presentation. You covered a lot in a very clear and concise way. I will give a recap of some of the points that I found most important to highlight to the audience. As a reminder to any attendees who do have questions, please input them in the chat. We can get to those next. So first, I loved how you broke it up into the 3 phases of intake, active matter, and former client. So many law firms only think about the active matter, and they really have that disconnect from everything else. I know that, for example, the first law firm I worked at, the intake process was not automated at all. And in fact, everything was to be done on paper, intake forms, handwritten. Those were to go in a separate filing system from the cases, the clients. It was very hard to do conflict checks or anything. Looking at them as a continuum, I think is a great point. Also, when you talk about former clients and how 70% of law firm business comes from referrals, that is a huge thing, and that ties into when you talked about critical KPIs. If you've already spent so much work and time in converting and doing excellent work for that former client, you really want to maximize that relationship and use them as a referral source. When you're talking about former client and different things to do, the engagement, I think, really can help you stay top of mind, not only for themselves, but for other people they may know as well. I know, for example, as some ways that attorneys I've spoken with have done this, sometimes in their disengagement letter, they will include a clause, please feel free to contact me later on if you'd like to do a new case. Please feel free to share my contact information. There are a lot of different ways to engage with former clients that I think attorneys are missing right now. And this is so important how you laid out step by step, not only some ways how to do it, but the importance of it. And I wanted to note too, in particular, when you talked about in the first stage for intake, the immediate engagement, this is so true that it helps the potential client pause. They can start off not only on a good foot with you, but they're also less likely to call around to other firms as they're looking to decide who to take their case. So these are just some of the things that your presentation really brought to mind. And just thank you so much for breaking out into the 3 phases. As another a few examples for clients as referral sources that I've heard of that people can think about. I know a family lawyer does periodic check-ins to see if people need updates to parenting plans. Sometimes people who do estate planning and trusts will do check-ins if they need to update if they've had additional family members. But there's so much that can be done with checking in with past clients. Also, when you mentioned about the client portal, that is one of my favorite tools that I wish more lawyers would use. And it ties into communication, how you talked about that was the #1 complaint at state bars. If the clients have a client portal, not only is it easier to engage with them, to share information, but also they will be able to know the status of their case much easier. And so it will
Yes.
have that two-way communication. So those were just some of the things that I wanted to pull out. Let's see. As for a question, I wanted to see, do you have examples yourself of how past clients have become a referral source for you or for friends of yours that are lawyers that you'd like to share on how some of maintaining that relationship afterwards has led to some success?
Yeah, so we've actually seen it as a business, right? So, obviously at Lawmatics, we have a lot of insight into this. And I will tell you that like for firms that we see just turn on something as simple as a birthday email, it's actually astounding at the percentage of law firms that then see business come from those birthday emails in the first 6 months of turning it on. It's like we see, I'd say probably, I think it's probably more than 80% of our firms that turn on that campaign will see some, birthday email related business in the first 6 months of releasing that campaign. And that's so simple, right? And it's just a no-brainer. The other big thing that we see is having that drip campaign that asks for a review to be left at like about the 2-month mark. It's not something that they want to ask for right away, but when it comes like after the first engagement or two after the case is over, when you ask for a referral and for a review, and that review gets posted, that has such a profound impact on business. And so that's like another example, I think, where we really see law firms have great success with implementing something like this.
Thank you. Those are wonderful examples. I just want to note too, when you talked about the drip campaign to ask for reviews, that more and more clients, studies have shown recently, are turning to online review sites to find lawyers if they don't have someone to ask. So those are very important as well. All right, we have a question that says, it is very time consuming to work on many cases while reaching out and marketing and blogging and articles. Yes, this is so true. There's a lot of hats lawyers wear. I would rather outsource this and have spoken to a few people. Do you do everything? And if yes, how do you schedule that and bill at the same time? And on the same line, when you're working on a client's case, what if someone emails you and what if you do not see it for many hours? So I know that was a long question. To condense it, it's talking about how do you try to juggle all those hats, working on the case, doing the marketing, doing the blogging, the articles, trying to outsource.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And so you're asking, I will answer it and I will say, like, I don't practice anymore, right? I've been running tech companies now since 2011. But obviously I have a lot of thoughts on this and a lot of experience with it. And I think like you run into a struggle that I think a lot of lawyers are going to experience. So I think you can use automation to accomplish a lot, right? So like, you obviously can't automate the process of writing a blog, right? But you can automate a lot of the process of marketing to your current clients and engaging with them and doing that. But I would 100% encourage you to look to, blogging, I would say to try to make time to do yourself, because I think that outsourcing blogging, especially as a small law firm, you need to have the right voice, right? And you need somebody who understands your subject matter, your area of practice. I think that's a difficult thing to outsource. So I would rather see you set aside a few minutes every day to maybe get one blog article a week, or even one blog article every 2 weeks. It doesn't have to be super frequent. And then you can outsource things like, I definitely think marketing is something that you could and should outsource. There are so many great small marketing agencies that are designed to help law firms, whether it's one lawyer or 100 lawyers, to help you with things like, paid search marketing or paid social marketing. And I would encourage you very much to outsource that as much as you can. And then, yeah, I mean, I think those are some good strategies. But I think that it's a struggle that everyone's going to go through, and you're definitely gonna have to take on some of it yourself and figure out a little bit of a balance. And then outsource the heavy lifting, which are like the things like managing the marketing campaigns and things like that. I see another question. How can you automate birthday emails? We use Keep as our CRM. So you're one of the last lawyers that I have heard of using Keep. I thought that we converted all of them over to Lawmatics because we've converted most of them. The easiest solution for you is to switch to Lawmatics because it's so easy. I don't know how, so that's one of the things, like, you bring up an interesting point. I don't care whether you use Lawmatics or not, but you bring up an interesting point about software in general, because Keep is not a software built for lawyers. It's built for just random businesses. And lawyers require some different things and have some different needs. And software that is built for law firms, oftentimes, like this particular thing, will just accomplish it for you a lot easier. Like whether it's Clio, MyCase, Practice Panther, Smokeball, like all these things are built for lawyers. You wouldn't go and use just your off-the-shelf time and billing platform that's not specific to law firms. You would use a law firm specific billing platform because you're a law firm. And the same thing goes with other software. And so, Keep might be really good, but I would encourage you to look at a platform that might be legal specific, because I think it will accomplish a lot of your needs a lot quicker. So I don't know that like Keep has access to all the data about a client's birthday and whether they can run campaigns based off a date like that. I only know what we can do. So I would encourage you to look into Keep and see if they can do date-based automations like that. And if not, come take a look at Lawmatics, because I promise you'll end up switching if you do come look. Another question here is, I also had a client leave my representation based on communication, even though I was successful in their hearing. So what is your method for that as well? So yeah, look, that's exactly what I'm saying, right? Like, you're a good lawyer and you got them a good outcome and they still left you because of communication, right? Communication is everything. This is where you got to use a client portal. I think a client portal is probably the easiest way to keep them like totally engaged. And the thing about a good client portal too is they're going to have like a messaging system. So your lawyer or your client could actually go into the client portal and like drop you a message. And whether you're in court, it doesn't matter where you are, you could like respond to that message from the client portal right away. So it just gives you a much better opportunity to communicate with them in a method that they want to be communicated in and in a timely manner. The other option too is like to ask your clients what is their preferred method of communication. Do you prefer phone call? Do you prefer email? Do you prefer text message? Do you prefer client portal interaction? Hear from them, and then you can tailor your plan to communicate with that client based around what they prefer. But this is all too often. This is exactly why I have this presentation, is exactly this question right here. It's just not good enough to be successful in the hearing. You have to really, really focus on over communicating with that client. Client portal is probably the easiest way to do that.
That's a great point. And just to add on a bit to what you said for that last question, I think that there are things you can do as well to establish early on with the client, as Matt was suggesting, finding out their preferred communication as you can. See if you can use some automation triggers, such as if you know that you have a client who often forgets about hearing dates, you can do things to remind them of upcoming hearing dates, appointments, different things on date field or others. When for the person who is asking about help with marketing, you can also use some tools such as Hootsuite to schedule and push out if you say have one article on your different social media platforms. But I think a lot of that is just being very open with clients on communication and setting expectations with clients early on about when you'll respond. And that including, maybe you're not going to respond to them if they email on a Saturday night and they can, know that you are still working on their case and will respond back to them when your office is open. So thank you for those questions. Let's see if we have, I think those are the main questions
I
for
think
now.
that's it for now. Yeah.
All right. Before we sign off, I just want to thank everyone for attending, both live in person and those who will be watching this on demand. We are delighted to have had you your time today. Matt, this has been absolutely terrific for takeaways. So much for us to think about on the 3 stages of the client journey, from intake, active matter, and former client, what you can do for touch points to keep the relationship going, to be top of mind. Before I turn it over to you, I just want, for closing thoughts, to note that our next webinars for busy lawyers will be November 24th, 2021. That's a Wednesday at 12 p.m. We'll have expert Charity Anastasio, and the topic will be legal billing, making payment plans pay off. So Matt, this has been an absolutely wonderful presentation about the legal client journey. Do you have closing thoughts for us today?
No, I thank you very much for having me. And I always appreciate the opportunity to talk to lawyers who might be struggling with some of the same things that I struggled with when I was starting a law firm. I always encourage people to reach out to me personally if you have any questions or thoughts too. You can always ping me. My email address is Matt, M-A-T-T, @lawmatics.com. I'm very easy to get a hold of and always open. And again, just customer service, it's the name of the game. And if you do that, you'll have a very successful business. And I wish everybody luck in getting there.
Wise words for practical takeaways. Thank you so much, Matt. And thank you to all of our attendees. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.